So let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful for the Sabbath that for some of us is coming still, and for the precious time that we have to study together. We invite your Holy Spirit to speak to our hearts as we look at the sanctuary message in all the places in the Bible that we can find it. We ask that you can guide and direct this study, that you can bring our minds' attention to the things that are the most urgent, and that you can give us clear and understanding hearts and minds. We ask, Lord, for a conviction to be brought to us, that we can also experience your power and victory in our lives. Be with each person, those present and those watching on YouTube. And we just ask, Lord, that your angels can be watching over them and that you can work in their lives in a powerful way. Thank you for hearing our prayer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, good evening, everyone. And for those that it's Sabbath, happy Sabbath. I'm just going to get a drink of water, which I should have done beforehand. So we're continuing our study on the sanctuary from Eden lost to Eden restored. And we looked at the story of Abraham offering up Isaac. Now, there's a point that I wanted to bring up that's not necessarily exactly connected with the sanctuary, but it is connected with this story. So this is, I'm reading something from Wikipedia here. So yeah, I'm not going to bring it up on the screen, but just going back to the story of Abraham, we know that Abraham had this covenant made with him by God, and that there's this chiastic structure involved in that, which we're going to look at because we're going to actually go to the book of Exodus. At least that's my plan for today. But we know that Abraham offered up Isaac, but Ishmael, according to Muslims, was the one that was offered up. So it's, where is this here? So this is when Ishmael was 13, he was circumcised at the same time as all other males in Abraham's household, becoming part of the covenant in a mass circumcision. His father, Abram, given the new name Abraham, then 99, was circumcised along with the others. At the time of the covenant, God informed Abraham that his wife Sarah would give birth to a son, whom he was instructed to name Isaac. God told Abraham that he would establish his covenant through Isaac. So we understand this, and there is dealing with Ishmael. So that's what I'm trying to address here. So we know that Ishmael is considered, well, he's the one that the Arabs are descended from, and Islam looks at Ishmael as their fathers, so to speak. Obviously, they go back to Abraham, but they look at this story of Ishmael being offered up instead of Isaac being offered up by Abraham. Now, so I'm just going to read some stuff here. So it's kind of weird stuff, what Islamic belief is. So it says here, in Islamic belief, Abraham prayed to God for a son and God heard his prayer. Muslim exegesis states that Sarah asked Abraham to marry her Egyptian handmaiden Hagar because she herself was barren. Hagar soon bore Ishmael, who was the first son of Abraham. God then instructed Abraham to take Hagar and Ishmael to the desert and leave them there. He did so, taking them to the location of the Kaaba's foundations, which was now in ruins. And as he turned away from Hagar and started to walk away, she called out to him and asked, "Why are you leaving us here?" To which Abraham didn't reply the first two times she asked. So, of course, this is just Islamic tradition and stories, what they believe happened. So, and the story of Ishmael comes to play in, you obviously know, the Ishmaelites are the ones that Judah sold Joseph to. It's Ishmaelite traders. And in other studies, we've run into the Ishmaelites. So they become extremely important here. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up has to do with the sanctuary. So when we look at Abraham offering up Isaac, what was it that we saw last week? What was the illustration? What did Isaac represent? Anybody got any memory of what we studied last week? What's your thoughts on that? Who does Isaac represent? What's the purpose of his Abraham offering him up?
He was like Christ, right? That symbolized Christ.
Okay, so he's symbolizing Christ, and he's symbolizing that we need this substitute, right? Because God has Abraham offer him up, but he doesn't have him offer him up. That is, Abraham speaks prophetically when he says God will provide himself a sacrifice. And then, but Abraham still doesn't know that God's not going to have him go through with it. But then God stays his hand. And then God provides a substitute. So the substitute is this ram that's caught in a thicket. Now, if you think about it, and we didn't really dwell on this part of the story so much, but if Abraham had offered up Isaac, what would that have said about the gospel? That is, if God had had him go through with it. I don't know if I'm asking the question right. Because could God have had Abraham offer up Isaac? Would that have been a fitting symbol if God had allowed him to go through with it? We didn't really ask this question last time.
No.
Okay, so Abraham obeyed God, is that he followed what God asked him to do. So God is illustrating righteousness by faith. And he's also illustrating this for Abraham's benefit, because Abraham had been given a promise, and Abraham tried to fulfill that promise in his own way. That is, he had Ishmael, which was not according to God's will. That is, God was going to give him a son through his wife, through Sarah. But instead, Sarah lacked faith, and Abraham lacked faith too, in that he thought that he must work out this on his own, because he couldn't see that Sarah could have a child. So, and Sarah couldn't see that she could have a child either. So that's where we get Hagar. Now, God, of course, is going to test him on this very point, the promise. But now he's going to put before him this choice. to either obey him and to trust that God will still fulfill his promises, or Abraham to work out something on his own. And Abraham has learned his lesson. So he's being tested. He's learned his lesson and he's going to go through with this. But we can see that God could not allow him to go through with it because he needed a substitute. That ram caught in the thicket is the substitute. Now, I always think of the text, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it's God that will in you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. God asks us to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling, because God, in doing that, God is working in us. It's not us really working out our own salvation because we're looking to God as well. But God expects us to struggle. And Abraham definitely has a struggle in his life of learning to follow God. So we know that the Islamic religion teaches that Ishmael was actually offered by Abraham as a sacrifice. So they take the story of Abraham and Isaac and they replace Ishmael in that story. Now, I've read it before. I was trying to find it. I can't find what I found before. Don't know why. I can't remember so I can't remember the name for it. They have a name for this day in which they celebrate this. Let me see. I found it here, but this is hard to read. The guy's writing is strange. He's not writing in English. Well, he's writing in some other language, translating it into English, it looks like. So let me see here. Anybody know what that's called, the sacrifice of Ishmael? I know there's supposed to be a name for it.
I don't know personally, but I do have Islamic friends, and they'd be very kind to. They'd be happy to tell me if I asked them.
Yeah. Okay.
They want to convert me to Islam, so I can ask them anything.
Okay. So here I'm because I had a site that explained it in sort of simple terms. All it's just saying here is that basically this one I'm finding. So anyway, we know that. So let's think about the difference between Hagar and Sarah. So I guess the place we can go in the Bible here. So let's do this here. So this is, no, I guess it's Hagar. Why does it make that loud noise? Okay, so let's go to Galatians chapter 4. And it says, tell me, ye that desire to be under the law, do ye not hear the law? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by promise. Which things are an allegory, for these are the two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which gendereth unto bondage, which is Hagar, or Hagar. For Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage with her children. Jerusalem, which is above, is free, which is the mother of us all. For it is written, rejoice thou barren that bearest not, break forth and cry, thou that travailest not. For the desolate hath more children than she which hath an husband. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are the children of promise. But as then he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the Spirit, even so it is now. Nevertheless, what saith the scripture? Cast out the bondwoman and her son, for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with the son of the free woman. So then, brethren, we are not children of the bondwoman, but of the free. So when Islam tries to say that they're descended from Ishmael, they're sons of the bond, correct? And then we can see that when they look at Abraham offering up Ishmael, they're caught in that same trap, right? I don't know how many of you know much about Islam, but one thing that they don't really have in Islam, and I know people who are involved in Muslims, is really the idea of forgiveness that we have in Christianity. That is, the idea of the cross that we have in Christianity isn't something you have in Islam. And we can see that in the offering up of Ishmael. The story is quite different, and I wish I could find it, because the story is not really the same. It doesn't have the allusions to the cross that you have in the story of Abraham offering up Isaac. So I'm going to have to maybe find that another time. But the point that I want to bring out here is that when we look at this covenant promise that's made to Abraham, it's about the seed. Does Christ descend from Ishmael?
No.
No. And so we can see that when Islam claims that they're sons of Abraham, but we know that the true sons of Abraham are those that are sons of Abraham by faith. Those that are of faith are the children of Abraham. But Islam has not only chosen not to have a seed going through Isaac, right? Because they're descendants of Ishmael. They want the seed or the promise or the blessing to be passed on to them. And this is something we haven't really emphasized much in this movement when talking about Islam. We always talk about the warlike nature of Islam. But when it comes to the cross and the gospel, Islam is devoid of that. It doesn't really even have a gospel. So when they make Ishmael the one who that Abraham offered up, God told him to offer up Ishmael, which of course doesn't really make any sense. I mean, from a biblical perspective, to just put Ishmael in there just because he happened to be your father. Because we don't have a prophet. Like Abraham has this son Ishmael, and Islam, their focus is upon Muhammad being the prophet. But we would have to say that he's illegitimate. That you can't have Abraham as your father and still have the promised seed, the gospel, being passed on. Because Muhammad or Ishmael or any of them, they don't fulfill the promise that was given in Genesis chapter 3, that the seed of the woman would bruise the serpent's head. They don't have that. And they have to completely discount the seed that points to Christ. And you can't have it both ways. Now, when it comes to Christ, do they believe that Christ died on the cross?
No.
No, they don't.
So Christ, in Islam, Christ doesn't die on the cross. So they don't even have a savior in their line, but they don't even have our savior. So even when they will say, well, they believe in Jesus, he was a prophet, they don't believe he died for our sins. And And this becomes an important story here, these two lines. So now, in some ways, I didn't really want to have to address this point, but I think it's needful. And I was trying to think, how do I address it in the context of the sanctuary? That is, when we look at Islam, and we're studying, right now we're studying the sanctuary, God's sanctuary. Where does Islam fall in that? Because I think part of the problem, and I'm trying to formulate the way to express it, because we know that within Adventism, there is this focus upon Islam. Now, what does Walter Weiss say about Islam? Where does he say Islam came from? Incorrectly, by the way.
I haven't paid much attention to Walter Weiss.
Okay. Well, he teaches that Islam was started by the Catholic Church. Now, what would be the problem with that prophetically?
That would give a link of Islam to the power of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, so it would just basically be I don't know, not the word, but a decoy or something like that. It would be, in a sense, a puppet of the Catholic Church, that because what he teaches is at the top, they're connected. And they're not, right? So they're not connected. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I know Angela said, she saw a picture of one of these Muslim clerics, kissing the hand of the Pope, but that doesn't really mean anything in the context prophetically. We have to know who Islam is. And this movement has been teaching lots about Islam. I mean, we made a prediction about what Islam was going to do on July 18th. We also believe that it was Islam that attacked the World Trade Center on 9/11. And yet we've not really ever addressed this area of Islam that I know of, dealing with Ishmael as far as the religious aspect of Ishmael. We've always looked at the warlike aspect. Now, when we look at Revelation chapter 9, and we look at the rise of Islam, what symbols do we see? What kind of power is Islam? What's
Beside it being satanic power?
the satanic power, right? Now, I mean, we could say all of Babylon is satanic, but not all of the powers rise from the bottomless pit. Right? So there's something about this power. Now, we also say, I saw a star fall from heaven onto the earth. So that star, according to Millerite expositors, is Muhammad, right? That's how they take it. Now, in Revelation 8, do we also have similar imagery to some other power that's similar to what we see here in regard to Islam? So Revelation 8. So we're going to see in Revelation 8:10, and a third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. So anybody know who this the star is that happens under the third angel?
Muhammad.
Okay, well, it's not Muhammad.
Sorry.
So, but it's the same imagery, right? Anybody know which power it is?
Those one of barbaric tribes.
Yeah, it's the barbaric tribes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Anybody know which one?
man, I got a tip of my tongue. Um,
Okay. Now I could just look at
Genseric, not Genseric, not him.
yeah, yeah, and I'm always because I'm always forgetting this one.
Yeah,
Which I get confused. So I'm asking, hoping somebody would answer so that I could figure it out.
Tilly the Hun, Genseric,
Yeah, and
and
the third one, which is the third one.
third one. Oh no. I know, but can't remember.
Okay, so here I'm gonna look this up in I didn't really want to do this, but Uri Smith. So when we deal with this one, it's and I think I could have looked up Albert Barnes, he would have given us the same answer. So the third angel, this is Attila. Okay.
Okay.
That's what it says here, Attila the Hun. Now the question is, and when we deal with wormwood, this bitterness, there's a whole bunch of things. I don't really know where to go here. Why would we use the same imagery for Islam that we use for Attila the Hun? Why is the Bible using the same type of imagery? Has anybody thought about that? Why would we have a unique symbol used for Islam? Why is it used twice?
I read a little more on Attilia's kind of person he was.
Okay.
The history of it. It'll give him more of a
If this is being used twice, isn't that also the same as a doubling?
Okay. So it is a doubling. So one of the things that we never really address in these seven trumpets is what's being attacked here. Is it's addressing the creation, right? So when you look at the seven trumpets, the types of things that are being judged are not kingdoms, right? Like in a literal sense. I mean, it doesn't show this literal language. It uses this symbolism, and all of this symbolism is nature. Correct? So in Revelation 8, you look at this, you're going to see these trumpets, and the first angel, there's going to be hail and fire mingled with blood that are cast upon the earth. A third part of the trees are burnt up, all green grass was burnt up. And the second angel, this great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And these are all things that are coming from heaven and coming down to the ground, right? So a mountain cast into the sea, hail and fire mingled with blood cast upon the earth. And then you're going to have this star fall from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, right? And then in the fourth one, the sun, a third part of the sun, a third part of the moon, and a third part of the stars. Now, when it comes to being a third part here, why is it using a third part in Revelation 8? A third part of what?
a third part of Rome.
So it's a third part of Rome. So this is Western Rome.
Isn't it not
Yeah.
the third part of the angels that fell from heaven?
Well, it is. So it's using this third part also as symbolism of the war that happened in heaven. So the third part is the third part of the angels. But here in this case, Rome is also falling into three parts, because we know that Rome was with Constantine was split into 3 parts through his different sons. And Western Rome is what's being attacked here. So, and when we have the sun and the moon and the stars, where does that bring us back to? Where's the first mention of the sun and moon and stars?
Creation.
Yeah, creation. Okay, so we're going to have that on creation. And which day of creation is the sun, moon, and stars?
Third. No,
Wednesday. So the 4th day.
right.
Okay, and so it's the 4th day, and it's the 4th angel that sounds, and the 3rd part of the sun was smitten, the 3rd part of the moon, the 3rd part of the stars. So this is bringing us back to nature, nature's destruction. With Western Rome, it's going back to the symbols that come from creation. And so this is undoing of creation. And then you're going to have this angel flying in the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the voice, the other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels, which are yet to sound. So you have 7 angels, 4 of them sound. That addresses the fall of Western Rome. So when we get to chapter 9, then, we can say that this is a type of doubling. Is this a doubling? Is what's happened to Western Rome now going to happen to Eastern Rome?
Yeah,
Okay. Now, when we look at a 3rd part, we know that there was 3 parts, but there's now really only 2 parts, Eastern and Western at this point. Correct?
Mhm.
So we're not having, so the 3rd part is Western Rome. Eastern Rome is actually 2 parts. Right? 2 parts of the kingdom of Rome that were given to Constantine's sons ended up as being Eastern Rome. Only 1 part ended up as being Western Rome. So now when you have the 5th angel sound, and you have the star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit, we have the satanic imagery of the star falling from heaven. But the other ones, they're addressing something different than what's being addressed in Revelation 9. So when you're dealing with Revelation 8, these symbols are the symbols of the things that God created, the creatures in the sea, the animals, the grass, all these types of things. And those are also going to be addressed in Revelation 9. But the focus here is this parallel with Satan, who is cast out of heaven. So in the first part, we do have the 3rd part, which is the 3rd part of the angels. So that's also showing that there's this satanic power, which would be these nations that take over Rome, right, which ends up being, Europe. But you have now in Revelation 9, you have this symbolism of Islam. Now, all of these different symbols, so you have the satanic power, it comes out of the bottomless pit. And this even goes back, if you really want to look at it, goes back to the condition of the earth before the creation on the 1st day. Now, when was Satan cast down to the earth? Somebody brought this up and asked me this question and had some thoughts on it. So when was Satan cast down to the earth? Before or after the 1st day of creation? Okay.
thinking before.
So it's before. So when Satan was cast down to the earth, what was the earth? According to Genesis chapter 1.
Abusos.
Yeah, it was a bottomless pit, was it not?
I think so.
It was
Correct.
form and void. So when Satan was first cast out of heaven and cast down to the earth, in that war, he was cast down to this, to earth in a bottomless pit. In this, so somebody asked the question regarding the period of darkness. Is the period of darkness satanic darkness? And of course we'd have to say yes, because the reform line is addressing the darkness that Satan had brought in his attack upon the character of God. So him being cast down to this bottomless pit is symbolic of what Satan is teaching. But God's going to create this earth. Satan is there already. And so, he's not there. He's not cast down after God creates the earth. He's cast down before. That's our understanding as Seventh-day Adventists. So when we have this star fall from heaven, we can see that this is addressing the earth even before creation as a symbol, right? The earth being without form and void. And so then there's going to be the smoke arising out of the pit and the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. Now, when we go back to the story of Abraham and Isaac and Ishmael, is there a great furnace in the covenant that's made with Abraham?
Yes.
Yeah. So a burning lamp, a smoking furnace, right? So we have these symbols that are used, but we can see that Islam is a counterfeit of this. Can we see that? And that instead of it bringing light, it's going to be darkening things. So this is a counterfeit message or a counterfeit gospel. Islam doesn't really have a gospel. Now it's a satanic power, but Islam also, as we see when we look at Revelation 9, it says there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power as the scorpions of the earth of power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God on their foreheads. So Islam has been given prophetically to attack the papacy, and because they're going to attack the papacy, they're also going to attack Eastern Rome. But we know that historically, does the Catholic Church have battles with Islam?
Do they have battles with Islam? Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why do they have battles with Islam? What is the reason that Islam is threatening the Catholic Church? At what times in history?
Whenever the Catholic Church is on the rise, Islam becomes on the rise to protect God's people.
Right. So Islam can't be created by the Catholic Church prophetically because it's an enemy of the Catholic Church. It's not controlled by the Catholic Church. And we see this historically. To me, it's kind of a foolish idea. And maybe I should use the word foolish, but it's a wrong-headed idea to think that somehow there's this conspiracy between the Catholics and Islam, that Islam was started by the Catholic Church, which would be way before the Catholic Church would have had that kind of foresight or power. And it right away becomes an enemy, first of Eastern Rome, which it conquers. But also it's going to have these battles with the papacy. So it conquers pagan Rome, but when papal Rome replaces pagan Rome, Islam is going to be fighting against it. And in looking at this whole point of who Islam is, this goes back really to the story of Abraham and Ishmael, because they are in bondage, right? They're children of the bondwoman, not of the free woman. They don't have a gospel. In order for a Muslim to be saved, he's going to have to accept the gospel. Now, we see that there is an approach to try to win over Muslims, just as there is with Jews that Adventists do. So we have Messianic Adventists who try to win over Jews, and we have Muslimized Adventists who try to win over Islam. That is, they try to appeal to them from the common history, the common religion that we have. But they're making a mistake, because if you want to win over a Muslim, they need to see that their religion is false, that it's a lie. It doesn't make sense to try to appeal to their culture or to the things that we have in common, because we really don't have things in common. We might on the surface, but we don't when it comes to the spirit of what Islam is about. Islam is not about forgiveness and love. And it's not about the cross. It's not about reflecting Christ's character. Those have nothing to do with Islam. So it's a point that I wanted to address, because we didn't really address it last time. And I don't think it's often addressed. And I'm probably going to have to look that up again to try to get that story of Ishmael, on how they tell the story of Ishmael, because it's quite a bit different than the story of Isaac. And of course, Ishmael or Isaac can't redeem us. It's the seed of the woman. And that seed of the woman goes through Isaac's seed, but it doesn't go through Ishmael's seed. Christ is not a descendant of Ishmael. So the promise doesn't lie in Islam. So I know I didn't really formulate that whole idea well. It's just kind of a thought. So I had never really expressed it before to anyone or written it down. It was just something I was thinking about in dealing with this story of Isaac. Any thoughts on that people can add to that?
I have to really consider this. I don't have a direct answer yet.
Okay. Yeah, so we're probably going to have to address it again, because I just, I started thinking about the idea. I didn't know how to present it. I definitely didn't present everything that I needed to, because the things I was looking for weren't there. Now, we're going to go to the book of Exodus. So we already have addressed this chiastic structure, and we looked at it a little bit, but we didn't go into detail. And I've tried to think, what things in the story of Genesis could I continue to look at? And pretty much I could look at the rest of the book of Genesis, but I don't want to do that because I don't have the time to. Other than a lot of that story we're familiar with. We're familiar with the 7 years for Leah and Rachel, and that Jacob gets married to Leah and Rachel in the same year, probably a week apart. We're not certain if that's what it means by let him fulfill her week. My position is that the week just means you get to get married to Rachel, but you're going to have to work another 7 years. Some people take the position that he has to wait a week and also work 7 years. But the point is, he gets married when he's 84 years old. And then he's going to have 12 children in 7 years. If we count Dinah, is that her name? I always get her name mixed up.
Yeah, Dinah's the daughter.
Yeah, Dinah's the daughter. So we include, so there's 7 children that he has in 7 years, with his 2 wives and the 2 handmaids, right? And then Benjamin's going to be married or be born later, right? So you're going to have these 12 children in 7 years, and 12 times 7 is 84, right? And Joseph's going to be married, or not married, born when Jacob is 91. So at the end of that 7 years, Joseph is going to be born. And we know that. We've worked out the chronology in other places, and it's really clear in the Bible. There isn't many people who disagree with that chronology because of all the clear different chronological keys that are there, the spans, the ages. So we know definitely, based on the age of Joseph being 39, when Jacob is 130, that he obviously had him when he was 91 years old. There are some people who try to argue that there's these two different marriages 7 years apart, but you have a hard time fitting in the story of the different births if Rachel isn't also married and able to, produce children with Jacob. So there's just all kinds of problems when you try to create some kind of other chronology. So he begins to work for Laban when he's 77, and 2 periods of 7 years follow. So when he's 84, he's married after the first period of 7 years to Leah and Rachel. And then he works for another 7 years. And when he's 91, Joseph is born. And so that structure is really important, that chiasm. Now, we know that this is about the cross. So all of these structures are about God's promises or his fingerprint of the cross. And the cross is connected to the sanctuary in lots of different ways, not just through the animal sacrifices, but where it's placed chronologically in history. So we know at the beginning, Abraham comes out of Haran. He's given this promise, and later it's renewed, and specifically confirmed. He works out that covenant when he slays those animals in half, and God walks through between those animals, making that covenant. So he cuts a covenant with him here. And then also it's going to be renewed again, dealing when Abraham's 99, about the birth of Isaac. So we have really 4 times, if you want to look at it, coming from Ur, then Haran, then the story in Genesis 15, and then once again when Abraham's 99 and promised that Sarah's going to have the son, and that's going to be Isaac. So we have that story. We have the story of Joseph. We have Joseph's dreams, the baker and the butler's dreams, Pharaoh's dreams. These are all part of a structure. And I've gone through these other times. But when we get here to Exodus chapter 4, I think it is. Is it chapter 4? I always get this wrong. No, it's chapter 12. I want to go to first. Chapter 12, verse 40 and 41. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of 430 years, even the selfsame day it came to pass, that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. So which day is this referring to? That they go out from the land of Egypt? Which date on the biblical calendar?
The 14th day of the first month, isn't it?
Okay, it would be the 15th day.
Okay.
And we find that in Numbers chapter 3. So I want to deal with this chronology because I'm a chronology guy, but it really does help us understand this story. So if you go to Numbers chapter 3, is it chapter 3? No, it's chapter 33. Yes, here it is. 33:3. And they departed from Ramesses on the first month, on the 15th day of the first month, on the morrow after the Passover. The children of Israel went out with a high hand in the sight of all the Egyptians. So I've said other places that I've held every single opinion on the Passover, both in the Exodus Passover and the Passover at the time of Christ, on the chronology of it. I've held through the years all these different opinions because I studied different material, and every time I read someone, they would convince me that they were right until I'd finally worked through and understood all of the different niceties of it and was then able to sort it out for myself, and especially with the help of the spirit of prophecy. So they're going to depart on the 15th day of the first month of the morrow after the Passover. So the Passover is on the 14th. The 15th is the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So that's the date that they're going to, Ellen White says that it's going to be in the morning before sunrise that they're going to then depart. And that means that on the evening of the 13th, they slay the Passover lamb. They sprinkle the blood upon the lintel and the doorposts. They ate their meal. And then after morning, after sunrise, they're going to leave their houses and they're going to gather together at Ramesses. They're going to spoil their neighbors. So they're going to ask for gifts of their neighbors so that they can go on their journey. And their neighbors are going to be willing to get rid of them. And why are they willing to get rid of them? Why are the neighbors willing to give their gold to the Israelites?
They fear for
Because-
their lives.
Yeah, because their firstborn son died in every single house. And so the Israelites now are going to have to leave Ramses on the 15th day of the first month. Now, Ramses is a city or an area near where they are. So they're going to take time. So they're going to stay in their houses overnight. So I'm not going to go through the whole story, but they have to stay in their houses. So they couldn't spoil their neighbors if all this stuff happened on the 14th, like from the 14th, like if you have Passover start on the evening of the 14th, which would really be beginning the 15th, you couldn't now have it happen in one night. The whole logistics of the story of what happens, if you work it out where they are, the time it would take to travel, and then to gather together before sunrise on the 15th day of the first month, which is Ellen White says, when they leave Ramesses, they would have needed that whole extra daytime and the previous and the nighttime. So they have an extra 24 hours after that Passover night. And then it's the next day, the 15th, that they're going to leave. And this is an important point because when Jesus keeps the Passover with his disciples, it's on the evening of the 13th that they slay the Passover lamb when the 13th ends. The Bible calls it the evening of the 14th because the evening of the 14th begins the 14th day. We would just say, well, it's the evening ends it, if that makes sense. So this is kind of an important point, though I'm not going to go into all of the evidences of it. But this is what we understand from reading the Spirit of Prophecy and our study of the Bible, is that that's when this occurs. On the 15th day of the first month, in the morning, just before sunrise, they leave Ramesses. And then going back to Exodus chapter 12, we have this 430 years. Now, we want to deal with this symbol here, because this is extremely important to understand this symbol, that they're going to leave on the self-same day. Now, when it talks about the self-same day, there are differences of opinion. But we take the position that the day that they leave on the 15th day of the first month is the day that they entered Egypt. So when it says, and it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the self-same day it came to pass, that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. So I want to illustrate this so people can see it quite clearly. Okay, so.
Kind of a pretty severe angle on that.
Yeah, I know. I have to fix this. It's, I don't know what it's doing. Oh, it's tipped sideways or something. That's better, right? There we go.
Yeah, that's good. It looks good.
Okay. So here we have the 430 years. So we're going to have 1963 BC, and we're going to have 1533 BC. So this is a period of 430 years. Now, this is going to be on the 15th day of the first month, on the self-same day. Now that means the self-same day means it's on the 15th day of the first month that they enter Egypt. So this is 1748 BC on the 15th day of the first month. Now it's after a period of 430 years of sojourning, not 433 years in Egypt. So why do they say 430 years and then on the self-same day when they're actually referring to this date, not at the beginning? Why would we say the self-same day refers to this date and not to this date?
I'm trying to pay attention to what you have on your board, but it's hard for me because you've got the Bible up on the screen right now.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, that could be.
Okay.
distracting.
So let's do this.
There,
How's that?
Just a bit better.
there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
At least I'd switched my camera.
Well, yeah, that's good.
Right?
Okay. So I have here 1748 BC. This is the date that Jacob enters Egypt.
Right.
And this is the day that they leave Egypt. But it says in Exodus at the end of 430 years on the self same day. But it doesn't, but it makes you, it assumes that you understand that the self same day is referring to the time that they entered Egypt.
Right.
That it's not a period of 430 years, that this is 215 years. Right? Because we know this is 215 years based on the ages of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when they had their kids and so forth. So we know this is 215 years. Jacob is born in the simple ways, 25 years from when Abraham's 75 to when he's 100.
Oh,
And then there's going to be 60 years here. And then it's going to be 130 years. Jacob's going to be 130 when he enters into Egypt. And if you add,
yes, white is go out of Egypt.
the Israelites go out of Egypt in 1533 BC on the self same day that they entered into Egypt. Now, why is this important? Like, I bring this up, and this is not something that is generally understood. Jeff understood it and talked about what it meant the self same day. So why do we say this is the self same day refers to this date? It is an assumption, but there's a reason why.
Would it have more to do with the perfect fulfillment of the time?
Okay, so we know there's a period of 430 years, but what he wants us to focus upon, what Moses is wanting us to focus upon, is that this is the center of a chiasm.
Right. Okay.
So he really wants us to understand that. And he recognizes that this is a period of 215 years. He doesn't tell us that, though, because he's going to assume we know it. That is, it's something that's really hidden in the scriptures that you have to dig out. But he's going to say it's the self same day. And that means he's going to point to this center point as the key that unlocks this history. And remember, this is those animals that are cut in half that the burning lamp and the smoking furnace pass between. So the center of a chiasm is not the most important point in a chiasm.
Theodore.
Yeah.
I did add things up. The meaning of years, it'd be 327.9.
Okay. If you're at,
Three, yeah, 327.9.
okay, so if you subtract from 1748, if you subtract
three,
1533,
sorry.
Then you get
327.9.
yeah, okay. Thanks, Mark. So this becomes, it's not the most important part of the chiasm, because there was this discussion back in 2020 last year about it, where Bronwyn was talking about it. And I made the point that the center of the chiasm is just the key that unlocks it. That is, if you want to understand the end of the chiasm or the beginning, you need to understand the center. But it doesn't mean that the center is the most important part. Sometimes it can be the end of the chiasm that's really the focus of a chiasm. But you need this key to unlock the chiasm. That is, if, and the Bible doesn't tell us it's 215 years here, but it does tell us this is 215 years. And it does talk about the period of 400 years. Now, the line, the 4 generations, remember, Abraham is given 400 years of affliction, and that's going to go back to Ishmael mocking Isaac at Isaac's weaning. But he's also going to talk about 4 generations. And it says he's going to come out in the 4th generation. Now, in the 4th generation, what line are we going to be given? Whose line of Jacob's sons are we going to be given that leads us here to the 4th generation? Anybody know? Which sons are we going to count? Because the Bible only gives us one line that we can count.
12.
Okay, so Jacob has 12 sons. And which one of his sons are we going to count the line to get to the end of the 4th generation?
Wouldn't it be Levi?
Okay, it's Levi. Now we know that really specifically because we're given this genealogy of Levi, and I always forget where it is. I think it's chapter 6. Yeah, Exodus 6. Okay. Yeah, so it's just not at the beginning. Okay, so we have here the genealogy of Moses and Aaron. Now, this is, of course, their descendants of Levi. And it says in verse 16, now it's going to talk about all the different genealogies and stuff, but the only one they give us any ages for is the descendants of Levi. So it says, these are the names of the sons of Levi according to their generations: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And then it says the years of the life of Levi were 137 years. So how old was Levi when he left Canaan and entered into Egypt? So how old was he when he entered Egypt? He lived to be 137 years old, but how old was he? Okay, so
Wasn't he about 47?
okay, so
I'm doing that from memory.
yeah, so if you look at this here, we're going to have this period of 7 years, and there's going to be 12 sons born. And this is, Joseph's going to be born here. And when Joseph when we get to this point here, and maybe I'll do it this way, try to make this somehow line up with what's up here. So we have this period of time here. Joseph is going to be
39.
right? Now, how much older is Levi than Joseph? What's the oldest he could be?
46, given that what you're dealing with right here.
Right. So Levi's when is he born?
He's the third born.
He's the third born to
Leah,
Leah. So he's not even going to be born right at the beginning, right? So she's going to have what? Reuben first,
Reuben, Simeon,
and Levi.
Levi, Judah.
Right. So we're going to say at least, he's probably maybe going to be 4 or 5 years older than Joseph.
At most.
At most. Okay. So you're going to have him here. Let's just say he's going to be 44. So
Okay.
he's 5 years older. So he's going to be 44. Now he's going to live to be 137 years old. So after he enters Egypt, how old is he going to be? How long is he going to live until he dies?
93 years.
Okay, so he's going to live this period here. He's going to die when he's 137, and that's going to be 93 years. Okay, but of course he's going to have a son. So Levi has Kohath as his son, right?
Right.
So he has, let me see. Well, he has Kohath. He has Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. But it's going to be through Kohath that we're going to get his next line. So they're going to mention his other sons, but the only one that they're going to give the age of is the one that ultimately is going to be the father of Aaron and Moses, right? So it says in verse 18 here, I'll switch so you can see this. I just got to remember to switch back. So the sons of Kohath, Amram, Izhar, and Hebron, and Uzziel, and the years of the life of Kohath were 133 years. So he's going to live to be 133, right? And then we're going to see that his son Amram is going to also live to be 137 years, just like Levi. And then how old are Aaron's going to be the firstborn, and how old's Aaron going to be when they enter into Canaan, when they leave Egypt on the Exodus? So
Isn't he going to be like 83?
okay, so 83. Okay, so you're going to have over here, maybe I should kind of jam this a bit more here. So we're going to have 93 years here. That's going to be 137. And then we're going to have another son. So this is Levi. And then you're going to have Kohath. And he's going to live to be 133 years. But it doesn't tell us how old Levi was when he had Kohath. But we would assume that he's not going to wait until he's 137 to have Kohath. He had Gershon, Kohath, and the other two guys, can't think of their names. So anyway, you got Kohath, and he's going to have a son, and his son's going to be named Amram, and he's going to live to be 137. So there's 137 for this line. And then you're going to have Moses and Aaron. And so he's going to be born here somewhere, but he's going to be 83, Aaron. I don't know if you can see that. Well, you can't see anything because I got my Bible there. Okay.
I can see it.
Okay, so I'm going to just tip this down. Okay, so we got Aaron, Kohath. This is Amram. Now, what some people try to do, if you wanted this to be 430 years, what would you have to do? Okay, let's say if I added up and 93 years, 133, 137, and 83, what would I get?
Okay. You want to add those? Fine. Oh,
Did you add them?
that'd be four. Am I reading it right? 448? No, I can't be.
446.
446. Okay.
Okay. So
No, I'd be, okay, it's 137. I had it was 139. Sorry.
So it's 446. That would be assuming that Levi had his son Kohath the year he died. And then Kohath is going to have his son Amram the year he died. And then Amram is going to have his son Aaron the year he died. That would give us 446. Now, some people actually do this. What they say, and they do some other funny math stuff, but they try to argue that this is basically naming these kids. These are the kids that they're going to have near the end of their life. And so they try to fit this 430 years all in Egypt. But this would be very unrealistic. You're going to probably have your sons maybe when you're around 40. Right?
Right.
Now, we also know that that Levi's sons were born earlier. And it's too much for me to go into this study, but it has to do with the number of people that are going to come out of Canaan and enter into Egypt. So one is, we know that some of them already had children at the time that they entered into Egypt. Now, if they come out in the fourth generation, how are we counting these generations? That's the other point we want to look at. So these are the generations that are given us. First, second, third, fourth, correct?
Correct.
Now, obviously Aaron would have had children, and they're going to be in Egypt and they're going to come out of Egypt with Aaron, but they're not counted. And why not? Why doesn't it say the fifth generation? Or if Aaron's kids had children, that would be the sixth generation. Why are we counting Aaron as the fourth generation? It's a simple answer.
Because he's the direct descendant of Levi.
And he's still alive,
Right.
right? So even though there might be fifth and sixth generations when Aaron is 83, we're not counting those. We're counting the one that's still alive, the fourth generation. So that means we have to count Levi as the first generation that comes out of Egypt.
But if we stretch that 215-year time frame,
Yeah,
I think you'll find that Amram was also alive at the time that they came out.
you think that Amram was alive at the time they came? You mean here, he's alive at the time they come out of Egypt?
Correct.
Yeah, I would think he was as well. So you couldn't even do it that way, because if he's still alive, you can't add these 83 years at the end, right? That's what you're saying?
Well, no, I'm saying you can add that because that would still keep Aaron as fourth generation.
Yes. But what I'm saying is, if somebody was going to try to argue that Amram had Aaron when he's, and then Moses, at the end of his life, but we have 93 years here. And if we put 133 And then we added 137, saying that Amram, because he did enter into the land of Canaan, he left Egypt. And if you added these together, you would get 270 plus 93. That would only be 373. So it wouldn't even be 430 years.
Well, okay, but if you have the 93, the 133 and the 137, you're at 363 years.
Okay, 363 years. Yes, 363. But that's still
Okay.
not 490.
No, I'm not looking at the 490. I'm looking at 215.
Right. So, yeah, but obviously we know that he's not going to have his son at the end of his life.
Right.
Video off.
Yeah.
Give me a second.
Okay.
So as I'm looking at this, based on our conversations earlier this week, how does this relate into a MOLAD interval?
You mean 430 years?
Yeah.
How many months is that? Is that what you're trying to say? And how
Well,
many?
I'm looking at this because we know that, okay, if we know that the day that they came out of Egypt was the 15th day of the first month.
Yeah, you want to know exactly how many days?
Yep. And then we're looking at the 15th day of the first month as being the self same day that Jacob went into Egypt.
Right. So the number of days in 250 biblical years. So I'll just do here. I'll show you what I'm doing instead of looking at my whiteboard. So what we would do is we go to 1748 BC. Oops. And yeah, I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it. And I need to go to the 15th day of the first month. And I can save this here, and it's going to put that date down at the bottom. And then I'm going to go to 1533.
Okay.
And I need to go back a week. So then I also have the 15th of Nisan. And then I'm going to save that. So we look at the number of days. It's 78,522 days. Now, if I wanted to figure that out, I have this MOLAD calculator here. Right. So the number that I had again was, forgot it already, 78522. And what I need to do here is to figure out how to get that number. So I'd probably go something like, just want to see what that does. Okay, that's interesting. So that's a bit more. So that's too much. Okay, so I'm getting closer. So that's 7, I need 785. What was it? 22, right? Yeah, you understand what I'm doing?
I do.
Okay. So that's too much. So I need to go 6. That's too much. I wish I didn't have to always go back here. Well, it's getting closer. That's too little. And that's just, now this is me just how many parts of a month, which is how many days. So that's to get 78522 days. And you're going to see that this here is 213 solar years and 220 and a third lunar years at this point. But I don't quite have the right number yet. So 7, 8, okay, so. Oh, there it is. So the number I get is 2659. So if I divide the day, oh, I didn't share the screen properly here. There we go. So if I divide the day into 2,659 parts, yeah, I would end up with the month being 7,522 parts. And that means in 78,522 days, it would be 214.93 solar years. So it's slightly less, and 221.583 lunar years. So is that the question you're asking there, Dwight?
Well, I'm looking here because what I'm trying to do is to look at the interrelationship with the MOLAD with all of this that we're recently doing. So
Now the one thing that we can do is, instead of, like, here we have these lunar years, but another thing about lunar years is they're
Theodore,
yeah, Mark?
I not see you.
Yeah, you should see my board on my computer. I shared the screen. You should see what's on my,
Not now.
well, then it's something on your,
You're different camera. You're doing camera is on.
Yeah.
I not see you.
yeah, you don't see me. 'Cause-
You're whiteboard.
Yeah, you don't see my whiteboard, you see my computer.
No. No, I say you're whiteboard, not your computer, not to you.
Yeah, I know.
I say you're whiteboard.
Mark, we're looking at my computer right now, okay?
Yes, could you please
No.
switch?
No, I cannot. So right now, so what we're looking at is these parts. Now, if I multiplied 215 years by a prophetic year, that is 360 days, I get 77,400 days.
okay,
And that's going to be 1,122 days less than 215 solar years. Now, we also have these lunar years. I could change this. So this is the number I want to look at here. So we could take this as lunar years. Now, if I wanted to make that exactly 1,500 lunar years, I'd have to make this number smaller. Now you can see if I did 2520 parts, it would make 210 lunar years. So how would I add another 5 lunar years? What number would I need to add? And if I did 2592, you can see that's going to be 216 lunar years. So this number gives me exactly 1/10 of, if I divided this into 25,920. So it would be somewhere less than that. So maybe 2577. That's a little bit. 2578. You see what I'm doing?
take it to 2580.
Okay, so 2580. And that's going to be 215 lunar years. So we have these numbers, whether they mean anything at this point, we don't know. But that's what you're asking me to do, is to look at these
Right.
days in these parts. Now, the other thing that we could have looked at, of course, is the number of months that it ends up being, which is going to be the same number as parts, right? So whatever number of parts, it's going to be this many months. And the other number we had, I can't even remember now what we had. Anyway, it was 2.6 something or 2.7 to get these to be solar years. But anyway, you could look at the actual number of real months or the actual, so these are real months. It would be less than that of prophetic months. So 15, how many months is this altogether? These months here of, if this is lunar months, how would I compare that to prophetic months? Is the question that I'm asking. Okay, here's another way of looking at it. If I had 2520 instead of 2580, and I wanted to make that into months, 2520 months, that would be times 30, correct?
Right.
And that would be 75600. So it would still be less than the 78522 days, right?
Correct.
And that difference would be 2922, which would be, that's how many the differences are. So you wanted to look at it, we looked at it.
Well,
The
okay,
significance-
because this, yeah, all right.
Okay, you go on.
No, I'm just having to think through a couple of things. That's all.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, and so and there's nothing, and these are the types of things I do. I look at these numbers and try to see if there's some connection. And often we find connections that we don't often even see right away. But the number of parts that we have, or the number of days that we wanted to have, I'm going to try to get back whatever that number was. Is it that? No, it was 26. 2659 maybe. Yeah, there it was 2659. So that's the number of actual days would be 20, and they're always going to be months, right? So the number is going to work out as months, and it's going to be 2,659 months, because once I divide the day into the number of parts, then to get those number of days or number of parts of the month, it's going to show you that it's 2,659 months. From the time that they went into Egypt to the time that they came out of Egypt was exactly 2,659 months. So this calculator is useful in that way if you want to figure out the number of months in a given period of time based on the number of days, because it's basically taking that average length of a month. You could do it other ways too, because I have, but that gives you the number of months right there, 2,659, because it's this many parts. Means that this many parts of a month, if you divide the month into this many parts, then you would have this many days with this many months. And this would be this many lunar years. So it's 221 lunar years, and I think that's 7 months. And then 214.93 solar years. So it's a little bit less than 215 solar years by about 2 weeks or a week or something. And then it shows you the number of months that had 30 days and the number of months that had 29 days, and how many days altogether the months that had 30 days would add up to, and the months that had 29 days would add up to. So that's how the calculator works. So 217 prophetic months are 2,604 days. Reminds me of, okay, so
Eagle
yeah,
500 531.5.
okay. So 217 prophetic months. So this is pretty significant. So what Iran posted here
I
is
see.
that 2,604 days are going to be 217 prophetic months. Now, so that means all I do is I take 217 270, is it 217 prophetic months? So that's just 217 times 30. Is that what you're saying, Iran?
That's what he's doing.
217 times 30.
Would be 2604.
Okay, I get 6510. So I'm not sure what he did there.
Okay.
Can you explain around what you did to get that math? He says, I'll double check. So just explain what the calculation that you did. 2604 divided by 30 doesn't work out. You must have done some other calculation.
Oh, it's 12 times 217 is what I have here.
Okay, 12 times 217. Okay, I see what you're saying. Oh, okay, so what you're doing is you're dividing that by 12. Now, so that's interesting. That's actually even more interesting than what you were saying. So what's the significance of dividing? What is the significance of 12?
You on the 12
Well-
disciples or the 12 sons?
I was just going to say it's a year. So I think what I meant to put before was 217 prophetic years, not months.
Right, so 217 years, that is groups of 12 months. So 217 prophetic. It wouldn't be prophetic years though. Would it? 217.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm just probably not expressing it well, but it's 12 times 217. If you broke the year, if you broke up something into 217.
Right, so 2,604 years, right, is the period of time of the prophetic mirror, right, from 723 to 1863. But so you guys are not actually catching what I'm talking about. So remember when we dealt with the 391 years of Islam? And I'm going to go to the whiteboard again. We're going way off track of my topic, but it's important. It's an important point. And it'll help you understand what this is about.
Guys,
Yeah, Mark.
and the 35, 35, yeah, 30, 3,500, 3,560 to 8.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So if we go,
You do put this new number down, I will add them up again too.
okay. So if we're dividing this into 12s, we're dividing it into periods of 217 years, 12 times, right?
Correct.
So 1, 2, 3, 12. There we go. Do it like this, make it more even. So if you have 217 years. Now, how many months are in 217 years? And how many days?
It's if you do prophetically, then it's 78,120.
78,120.
Yeah, which is a combination of numbers that we've recognized.
So that's 217 times 360. And this number, you can see July 18th backwards, right? 187 or 71781, 20. These are an iteration of this number, right?
0.720. Yep, exactly.
So interesting. Now, see this number I ran into before. Now, how many months then is this? In 217 years, it should be obvious. It's 2,604 months, right?
Right.
Okay. And that's pretty obvious once we think about it. Now, I want to compare this to this. This is the 26th day of the fourth month. And this is the 26th day of the fourth month. And this is July 27th, 1449. And that's a Gregorian date. And this is July 27th, 1840.
And that's a Julian date, or no, that's Gregorian, sorry. Yep.
Right? So because they happen to line up. Now the Julian date here is July 18th, but the Gregorian date's July 27th. Now, when we studied this period of 391 years, we found that the Jewish calendar, which is a lunar calendar, so this goes to that Molad calculator.
Right.
Remember, it shows lunar years and Julian years. And you'll find if you go to here, and I'm just going to do it. I'm going to share the screen for a moment and just show you. If I put 403 in this box, whoops, didn't do that right. 403. I did that. Here, I have to undo this. I wrecked it.
5,509.
Okay, so can you see there what the lunar years are compared to the solar years?
Yes.
Okay, now you'll find that this period here of 33.583 lunar years is 32.583 solar years. So in 430 lunar months, we experience 391 Gregorian months, right? So if I divide this into 12, one, two, three. Okay, I divide it into 12, and I make this as 391 months. It will be 32.583 years on a lunar calendar. But these are our months. So this would be, here, I got to do this bigger somewhere here. Just see, this was something that I found when I was doing Josiah Litch's prophecy, is that this period of 391 years is not some arbitrary period. An hour, a day, a month, and a year makes 391 years. And that if I divide it into 12, each one of these sections is 391 months on our calendar. And it's going to be 403 months on the Islamic calendar. That is, these are lunar months. And these are calendar months. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, now this decimal at the end is just basically 32, I think it's 0.7, or no, 32 years, 7 months. That's how it is, 32 years, 7 months on our calendar equals 32 years and 7 months on the Islamic, or 33 years and 7 months on the Islamic calendar, because the Islamic calendar drifts. So it's going to go through 1 extra year every 32 years and 7 months. But to do it in whole years, you have to go 391 years. So 391 solar years are 403.
Please answer back to your what board?
So my calculator doesn't show that. Okay, so the
You know
calculator doesn't show this conversion. Now, there's a number to convert from lunar years to solar years. You multiply by 1.03.
Theodora,
Yeah,
clear turn to your whiteboard. I see your computer.
what about my whiteboard?
He's not seeing it. He's just seeing your calculator.
Oh, right. Okay, everybody's just seeing my calculator.
I have both screens up, so I never noticed.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you can always switch it yourself, but
We got a split screen.
so anyway, the point that we have here is that we had figured this out when we did Josiah Litch's prophecy. But do we see now we have the same thing with the 2,604 years? And the 2,604 years is related to the 26th day of the fourth month, is it not?
Yes,
But the symbol that we use to divide this, if we divide this by 12, is we get this number 217, which is the symbol of midnight. And it produces, of course, this number of months, because that's just logical, right? But the number of years is 217. And so 217 years has 2,604 months. It's just a way of looking at something in more detail, breaking it down. So there's something more here that we need to examine, which I don't have time to here. So if we're going to try to sum up what I'm talking about here, is there a connection? And
Theodora,
yeah,
4,036.
okay, thank you. So if there's a connection here, what is this connection that we just discovered? What is it that we're looking at? What is it that we're talking about? Because we were dealing with the 215 years. Now we're looking at this 217 years. Is there a relationship between the 215 years and the 217 years? Did we notice that relationship?
Two thousand 19.5.
Okay, thanks. So if we're going to have, if we're gonna understand this, so I'm gonna switch to this. Okay. Can anybody kind of sum up what we just noticed? I mean, I know we have to think about it a bit more, because we're dealing with Ishmael. And what is the connection? What is the connection between the 2 25/20s and the cross, for instance? This is an earlier study. This isn't the study on the sanctuaries somehow, but it is related.
right.
But the 2,604 days was the literal number of days, or not the literal, it's related to the week of Christ. Can we put it that way?
Yes,
Okay, so it's related to the week of Christ. So we already made a connection between the prophetic mirror and the week of Christ, that the week of Christ has the prophetic mirror in it. Now, the number, what was the number of days that we had for our prophetic mirror? So it wasn't 25/20. What was the number?
in the 70 weeks or in the 2,300 days, which one?
Okay, in the 70th week, what was the number of days?
2,569.
Okay, so now when we look at the number 2,569, I just put it in my calculator and share it.
But, my horse, they died.
What died?
My horse.
Your horse. Well, that's sad.
She's 19. And she's not 19. She's
Oh, really?
29.
29 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if I just switch those two center numbers, do you see that these numbers are related to each other? 2659 is going to be the number of days in 215 years.
Right.
But the 2569 was the number of days that we had in the week of Christ. Or not the number of days. Yeah, so that's the number of days. So the
Right.
number of parts of the day. So what is this telling us? Is there a relationship between the 215 years and the week of Christ? I mean, we already have a connection because it's a chiasm with the 15th day of the first month as the center, right? So we
Right.
already made this connection. But we now just took this calculator, this MOLA calculator, and we played around with it a bit. And we noticed some things. So we noticed that we have this relationship. Now, if we put this number in, we're going to get 217 lunar years are 2,604 parts. So we can see the number of lunar years is related to the number of months. So that's what we did there. Now we were looking though at years, 2,604 years. But these are months. So I'm going to have to spend some time doing a bit of calculations and showing you how we would divide that period of time. But we're dividing it here as lunar years. But if we wanted it to be solar years, we would have to increase this number, right?
Correct.
So if we did like 2730, that's 220 solar years. So that's too much. And I'm going to do what, 2659. That one was the one we had, so that's not going to help. 2699. But that's a little too high. So 2688, let's try that. Okay, a little bit less than that, 2685. Yeah, and that's probably going to go, that's probably as close as we're going to get to solar years. Because if I put this as 4, it's going to be, oh, that's close, 217. So 217 solar years is 79,260 days. So anyway, we're going to look at this some other time, maybe some other study.
Okay.
But the point that I'm trying to make here is that this connection of what we just did with the 215 years is that we could connect this to the 2,640 years or 2,604 years, right? We could take that 2,604, right? And we could see that that's going to be 2007 and 2017 lunar years. So we could divide, just like we divided the 391 years, and we could see significance in the lengths of months and how that cycle worked, a 391 year cycle, which is a natural cycle of the ecliptic. But we could now apply this, and we can see that this applies to how we look at that period of time for the 2,604 years. And there's another connection, which I don't have time to go into, but I'm going to show it maybe next time or some other study, where we can start to see, because we deal with the 252 years, but there are, and that's dividing a period of time differently. So different portions, but this 217 is pretty profound. Any other thoughts on this?
Not at this point.
Okay. So there's something that I can kind of see that it's there, but I'm gonna have to spend a bit of time with it. Okay, so the study went completely differently than I planned, but that's okay. And my focus was upon, because we're dealing with the sanctuary, I was trying to show that Ishmael is this counterfeit. Now he keeps showing up, right? He shows up in the 391 years. He shows up in the prophecy of Josiah, or Josiah Litch's prophecy, I should say. But it's also connected to Ezekiel. And remember, Ezekiel begins his prophesying at midnight on the 5th day of the 4th month, which 2117 is a symbol of July 21st, which is midnight in Millerite history. So it becomes this really significant symbol. Any other thoughts about this? Anybody just notice something before we close with prayer? Or have a question maybe? Something they're not understanding. I know not everybody's familiar with this calculator that we're using, because I haven't sent it to everyone yet, but you can see it on my, it's on my academia page. So it's just a way of measuring parts of the day with the years. Any thoughts? No questions? Everybody satisfied?
There's just a lot to think about right now.
Yeah. So we have I have some work cut out for me, because this is something that I never thought of doing. Looking at dividing that 2604. But this number, of course, is significant. But it's not just that that number is significant in that way, is that we can relate it to the lengths of months, not just years, right? That is
Correct.
604 months is 2,217 years. But it's also means that we can take these years and we can look at the number of days and try to understand them. And we can take them as literal years and also lunar years or prophetic years, because we did that with the 70 weeks. And this gives me some ideas on what we want to look at when it comes to looking at how this molad interval is related to the 70 weeks, because it is. But this now shows me something I never saw before. So the interesting thing about this, if I'm going to try to, put it in perspective for me personally, one is that God keeps giving us light. That is, there's lots of things we haven't noticed. Some of those things have always been right under our noses. And that is, we might have even have noticed a mathematical calculation, but not really fully understood its significance as far as it relates to time. Because how many different ways do we have to count a year biblically?
We have Gregorian, we have rabbinical, and now we have what we're showing here with the molad.
Yeah, so we have lunar years, we have solar years. So basically lunar years are Islamic years, which you already had before. But we weren't always applying them to things in the past. We only applied them to Islam. At least I did. But lunar years are slightly different than prophetic years, right? Because there's a different number of days in a lunar year, because a lunar year is based on a month of 29.53. A solar year is based on a month of 30.437. That length of a month, right? Because it's a Gregorian or Julian month. And then you have the biblical year itself, which is basically a solar year, but depending on the span of time, it might be slightly more, slightly less. If it's periods of 19 years, it'll be exactly pretty much the same date repeating. But you have other cycles, which I present in my paper. But we can see that these cycles relate to the prophetic periods in symbolic ways. So this 2,604 And I typed it in there before, and somehow I never really thought about the 217 lunar years, because I wasn't looking for that at that time. Becomes really significant. So anyway, we're going to close with prayer. So let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful for the Sabbath and for the things that you teach us in spite of our slowness of mind and understanding. And we know, Lord, that these things here today were not maybe the easiest thing to look at. But we are thankful, Lord, that as we dig into the scriptures, that you show us these things and that they're meant to be an encouragement, even though they could be a discouragement for some because we can't comprehend what we're doing. But we ask, Lord, that you can give us a measure of your spirit to help us to understand things and to realize what things are really important. I pray that you can be with each person who's following these studies, and that the things that they find, that they'll be precious to them and help them in the times ahead. We give our hearts to you again, Lord. Thank you for the Sabbath. And may the meetings on this Sabbath be a blessing. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.